Hey, welcome to Crossroads. A group of CCP hackers launched a series of operations and they were targeting candidates and even campaign personnel, guess what, in the 2020 US elections. And this same group of state-run Chinese Communist Party hackers was also breaching a UK voter system and was targeting key influencers right here in the United States. They were doing this for over a decade, allegedly. And this may have given the CCP access to voter information, notably in the UK at least, on tens of millions of people. And it also targeted US officials, journalists, businesses, activists, the list goes on. Authorities in the United States and in the UK are now rolling out criminal charges and sanctions against the Chinese Communist Party over what was just found. Let me start by showing you AP. It says hackers linked to the Chinese government launched a sweeping state-backed operation, meaning the CCP was behind it, that targeted U.S. officials, journalists, corporations, pro-democracy activists, and the UK's election watchdog. American and British authorities said Monday in an announcement, and they said a set of criminal charges and sanctions as well. It says the intention of the campaign, which officials say began in 2010, meaning for a very long time, was to harass critics of the Chinese government, steal trade secrets of American corporations, and to spy on and track high-level political figures. Western officials disclosed the operation carried out by a hacking group they call APT-31. I should note briefly, whenever they make names like this, these are the names that Western researchers give them, not the names that they use for themselves. APT-1 would mean Advanced Persistent Threat, which is not what the CCP would call them. But they call this APT-31, which is just the tracker designation they would have for it. And it notes that while sounding a fresh election year alarm about a country long seen as having advanced espionage capabilities, it notes the U.S. Justice Department charged 7 hackers, all believed to be living in China, meaning they're not being arrested, but they're charged. The British government, in a related announcement, imposed sanctions on a front company and 2 of the defendants in connection with a breach that may have given the Chinese access to information on tens of millions of UK voters held by the Electoral Commission in their country. Now, I want to be clear, most of the reporting I've seen, including the one I just showed you from AP, don't really show you the real meat of what took place. They're framing this as something meant as monitoring political figures and otherwise. But it's actually a bit more significant. Let me show you directly from the Department of Justice website and their actual announcement. Because one thing I found interesting is that all the news outlets I've read, they left out how this group of CCP hackers was also targeting the United States election, individuals tied in with key political campaigns. The U.S. Department of Justice said this, and I'll go over kind of the full breadth of what they exposed. They say an indictment was unsealed today, this was yesterday, charging 7 nationals of the People's Republic of China with conspiracy to commit computer intrusions and conspiracy to commit wire fraud for their involvement in a PRC, People's Republic of China, meaning in China, based hacking group that spent approximately 14 years targeting U.S. and foreign critics, businesses, and political officials in furtherance of the PRC's economic espionage and foreign intelligence objectives. Here's a quote. They say the Justice Department will not tolerate efforts by the Chinese government to intimidate Americans who serve the public, silence the dissidents who are protected by American laws, or steal from American businesses. This is according to Attorney General Merrick Garland. And he adds, this is another quote, this case serves as a reminder of the ends to which the Chinese government is willing to go to target and intimidate its critics, including launching malicious cyber operations aimed at threatening the national security of the United States and our allies. Another quote here from another individual, it says over 10,000 malicious emails impacting thousands of victims across multiple continents. As alleged in today's indictment, this prolific global hacking operation backed by the PRC government targeted journalists, political officials, and companies to repress critics of the Chinese regime, compromise government institutions, and steal trade secrets. That's according to Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco. and notes that the Department of Justice will relentlessly pursue, expose, and hold accountable cyber criminals who would undermine democracies and threaten our national security. Now, let's go into some of the meat of this. It notes further in, much further in, that as alleged in the indictment and court filings, the defendants, the individuals being accused right now, along with dozens of identified PRC Ministry of State Security intelligence officers, briefly, the Ministry of State Security is like the Chinese Communist Party's equivalent of like the FBI and the CIA combined. It's notably under the Chinese government side of the system. The CCP runs it, right? The Ministry of State Security, or the MSS. It notes it also involved contractor hackers, meaning they had hired outside individuals, and support personnel who were backing them. It notes they were members of a hacking group operating in the PRC. They were operating from within China and known within the cybersecurity community as Advanced Persistent Threat 31, or the APT-31 group. The APT-31 group, they says, was part of a cyber espionage program run by the MSS Hubei State Security Department. In other words, again, it's located in the city of Wuhan. It notes that through their involvement with the APT-31 group since at least 2010, the defendants conducted a global campaigns of computer hacking targeting political dissidents, like me maybe, and perceived supporters located inside China and outside of China, government and political officials, candidates, and campaign personnel in the United States and elsewhere, and American companies. This part's one of the key parts that has been left out in most public reporting, by the way, that it was targeting candidates and campaign personnel in the United States and elsewhere. And I'll be detailing that a bit more. It notes the defendants and others in the APT-31 group targeted thousands of U.S. and foreign individuals and companies. Some of this activity resulted in successful compromises of the target's networks, email accounts, cloud storage accounts, and telephone call records, with some surveillance of compromised email accounts lasting many years. It notes the targeted U.S. government officials included individuals working in the White House, at the Department of Justice, Commerce, Treasury, and State Department, and also U.S. senators and representatives from both political parties. They were monitoring, in other words, very sensitive information. What this group was basically doing is they were sending emails to their targets, disguised as news articles. If the individual were to open the email, it would enact a certain breach, which would then infect their network. They would get into the router, which is, again, what you plug into the wall to, activate your internet in your home, which makes your Wi-Fi available throughout your home. They were hacking the routers and through that gaining access to other devices and information within the target's network. Through this, they were able to gain access basically to everything that was that was connected to those things. We don't know the depth of their access, but if the Chinese Communist Party had breached the White House and the State Department and the U.S. Treasury and the Justice Department and the Department of Commerce and U.S. senators and representatives, it means that the CCP was basically spying on the entire U.S. government, in other words. And not only that, but of course monitoring communications, which could have included things, well, anything going through their networks, maybe compromising data. I think there should be further investigations, for example, into whether members of our government were maybe blackmailed by the CCP using information that they may have been contained on their computers or emails or otherwise. It might have included, for example, communications of classified information. We would assume that would be the case with many of these agencies and individuals. It could also include, for example, details on inner thinking, inner debates, and other things that the CCP could have used, for example, for diplomatic warfare or making trade deals and things like that. Now, this press release continues by noting the defendants and others in the APT-31 group targeted these individuals at both professional and personal email addresses, meaning they were going through every way they could. And maybe even their alternate name emails, like their private servers in their own homes, like several of these individuals had, by the way, like Hillary Clinton and Obama, for example, right? And notes further in that additionally, in some cases, the defendants also targeted victims' spouses including the spouse of a high-ranking Department of Justice official, high-ranking White House officials, and multiple U.S. senators. Targets also included election campaign staff. This is what gets interesting. It included election campaign staff from both major U.S. political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, in advance of the 2020 elections. Meaning, folks, the Chinese Communist Party had breached key individuals in the 2020 elections. And I think, frankly, this could open a big can of worms in terms of what kind of information were they accessing and how did the Chinese Communist Party use that information when they breached key individuals in the campaigns of the 2020 elections. And it's the allegations in the indictment regarding the malicious cyber activity target political officials, candidates, campaign personnel, and it says are consistent with the March 2021 joint report of the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security on foreign interference targeting election infrastructure or political organization, campaign, or candidate infrastructure related to the 2020 U.S. federal elections. I should note why this is really important as well. It is now acknowledged through this that the Chinese Communist Party had breached key election data. They were going after candidates, political parties, and otherwise around the U.S. elections. And based on the executive orders and other things that were passed ahead of the 2020 elections to make sure that they were secure from foreign intrusions, there was, in fact, a foreign intrusion, which would have meant that there was plausible reason to believe that there may have been, let's say, risks to the integrity of the elections. And any act by Congress or by judges or otherwise to not properly investigate or look at the evidence that there may have been irregularities in the 2020 elections is now, again, an act that would be in defiance of their oath to office, possibly. Meaning, folks, just saying that in plain language, U.S. officials swear an oath to protect the U.S. Constitution from enemies both foreign and domestic. Part of the Constitution includes the election systems. The Constitution is not just the Bill of Rights, which is how we often talk about it. The right to free, the God-given rights to free speech, owning firearms, to not be subject to unauthorized searches and seizures, and so on and so forth. Most of the Constitution is laying out the basic functions of our government, which includes the election system. And if there was a foreign threat through a known breach, in fact, from the Chinese Communist Party during that time, any act to not properly investigate those things could be a violation of the oath to office. And frankly, that's pretty significant. We now know that there were breaches, not even just a credible threat, but actual breaches. I think that the significance of this report is not being reported by most people. Frankly, again, if you look at the way most media have framed this very significant finding, what we're discussing right now, they've only noted that this was targeting Chinese dissidents. I mean, personally, I care about that because as somebody who's been investigating Chinese spy networks for close to 2 decades, I've been threatened by these individuals. I've been harassed by these individuals. I know how they work and I know how they operate. For me, that's a major concern. But this report includes that, but goes far beyond it. This represents evidence that there were credible threats that were ignored when it came time to look at possible abnormalities, let's say, within our election system. This means that credible threats and documented concerns, which should have warranted proper investigation, were ignored. And of course, people will say, well, the courts threw out all the election cases and so on about potential fraud. A lot of them were most of them were thrown out without even looking at the evidence. They never even looked at the evidence. Meaning possibly, again, including up to the counting of the Electoral College votes when the election in 2020 was certified. That very act of certifying the elections without allowing for proper investigation could represent a violation of the oath of office of the individuals who voted to certify the election. This is actually significant, like deeply, deeply significant. Back to the DOJ report, though. It says that report cited incidents when the Chinese government-affiliated actors materially impacted the security of networks associated or pertaining to U.S. political organizations, candidates, and campaign during the 2020 elections. Folks, I want to emphasize how serious that is. The report now coming out on this advanced persistent threat group, meaning state-backed hackers within the Chinese Communist Party, they cite incidents when individuals working on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, quote, materially impacted the security of networks associated with or pertaining to U.S. political organizations, candidates, and campaigns. Meaning that they actually breached, they impacted, materially impacted the security of networks related to those individuals. Meaning devices were actually breached, meaning this was not just an attempt, it was a successful breach. And of course, this was around, again, the 2020 federal elections. There were actual breaches of systems, according to the official announcement by the Department of Justice. It notes as well, that report also concluded that such actors gathered at least some information that could have released in influence operations, but which the Chinese actors did not ultimately deploy in such a manner. Now, a lot of people would note this part as a way to write off the previous part, because there's two sides with it. On one side, there is material breach of systems. They actually breached systems. The other side of it is, according to this, it says that the Chinese communist hackers, right, gathered information that they could have released for influence operations, but somehow just decided not to do so. And so this is about influence operations, meaning that information they had stolen, they could have used to approach people and try to bribe them or blackmail them or something else. They claim that didn't happen. But again, this is two separate issues. The actual breach versus an influence campaign using stolen information. The breach is the important part, and that breach is the part that is, again, being ignored everywhere as far as I've seen. Now, notes that consistent with that conclusion, the indictment does not allege that the hacking furthered any Chinese government influence operations against the United States. And again, this part would be the part that most people would focus on and try to write off the real serious part, the actual breach of our election systems. It notes the indictment's allegations nonetheless serve to underscore the need for U.S. and allied political organizations, candidates, and campaigns to remain vigilant in their cybersecurity posture and in otherwise protecting their sensitive information from foreign intelligence services, particularly in light of the U.S. intelligence community's recent assessment that the PRC, the People's Republic of China, the CCP, may attempt to influence the U.S. elections in 2024 at some level because of its desire to sideline critics of China and magnify U.S. societal divisions. In other words, significant stuff, folks. Now, of course, we'll see what it means when it comes to the 2024 elections. Again, because what we're looking at is evidence that there were actual breaches in the 2020 elections. And again, Congress voting to certify the elections while ignoring the evidence that there was need for further investigation, that's significant in and of itself. The main point they're using to write off a lot of that is there was no evidence of influence operations being carried out and information on key individuals, but that would be different from them, for example, having breached the election systems, according to this. The other side of it, of course, is going into 2024, what it means if Biden wants to secure the elections from foreign threats. Because, of course, any actions, any government intervention within the election system right now is concerning to many people. I would say that if there is credible threat from the Chinese Communist Party that they could breach our election systems, under rational grounds, this would mean that they should maybe act to close some of the loopholes in our election system. Maybe get rid of universal mail-in ballots, maybe get rid of certain systems that can be breached or used by hostile foreign actors. Maybe get rid of the things that allow for fraud to take place, to close the loopholes in our elections, to strengthen the integrity of our election systems. But they're not doing that. They're doing the opposite, at least so far, right? What they're doing instead is trying to solidify in law the changes that were made during the COVID-19 pandemic, changes that overturned many laws that were in place to make sure fraud did not take place in elections, and open the door to actually cases we have in fact seen of individuals, for example, disappearing votes, of individuals, for example, stuffing ballots, of individuals falsifying signatures and otherwise. Very real, credible, documented, and in some cases even prosecuted cases, which are known, and the loopholes that allow for those things are not being closed. The concern people have, though, is that rather than close the loopholes in the elections, that individuals might say, you know what, we need to fortify the elections, right? Like the Biden administration did, for example, in Brazil. They helped them fortify the elections to help Lula get elected recently. Or, for example, like the deep state did, according to, I think it was Time magazine, where they helped fortify the American election system in 2020. It's these individuals who, when they say fortify, don't actually mean creating election security. They mean tearing down things that are normally there to protect against fraud, while notably allowing loopholes that are often illegal to be utilized by campaigns in ways that, again, would normally be illegal. But they've legalized illegal activity and therefore deem that there's no problem. Now, folks, meanwhile, the fake narratives around what took place on January 6 are falling apart, and the real story keeps getting more serious. I'll be talking about some of the new evidence coming out because it's a pretty dang big deal, but that'll be after a quick break and a word from our sponsor.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low-price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. The fake narratives around what took place on January 6 are falling apart, and the real story on what took place on January 6 is getting more serious, because guess what? It turns out that in addition to falsifying evidence, doctoring videos, and even deleting evidence, the January 6 committee, the one that was led by Democrats, was even using its powers in Congress to threaten people who were trying to tell the truth of what happened that day. The Post-Millennial says former President Donald Trump's former acting defense secretary, Chris Miller, has said that the J6 committee, the Democrat January 6 committee, threatened him to, quote, make his life hell if he kept on claiming that Trump authorized the National Guard to secure the Capitol on January 6. It's now known that Trump did that. Trump authorized the deployment of the National Guard to secure the Capitol, and guess what? That request was not taken by key individuals, including Nancy Pelosi and others, including Muriel Bowser, meaning the breach of security on January 6 was not the doing of Trump. The breach of security on January 6 was the doing of the Democrats. Now, it notes that Miller spoke to the Daily Mail about the allegations and said that when he would go on TV interviews to recount his experiences with Trump calling for the National Guard, which breaks the entire narrative on Trump trying to overthrow democracy and everything else. It says the J6 panel, the Democrat House Committee, would bring him in for hours at a time for additional testimony. It notes that Miller had only been on the job for 2 months when he was thrust into the situation. He said it was clear that Liz Cheney was running the show. And Liz Cheney, by the way, is in the hot seat right now for this. I'll get into that in a minute. Now, it notes, by the way, that a June 2022 interview with Sean Hannity and Trump-era National Security official Kash Patel, Miller told the outlet apparently, what he told him apparently hit a nerve with the committee. And it says, quote, the two of us were on the Fox News show, and the next day my lawyer got a call from the Jan 6 staff director. I forgot exactly who it was, but basically saying very legalistically, well, if your client has additional information he wants to share, we'd be happy to have him interviewed, Miller told the outlet. And he continues saying, It was more that latent threat of, if you want to keep going on TV, we're going to drag you in here again for additional hours of hearing testimony. So that was the nature of the whole thing. And now it notes that the revelations from Miller come on the heels of newly released testimonies that provide evidence that Trump had called for the National Guard to be deployed in much heavier numbers for the Capitol for security on that day, which again unravels the entire narrative trying to incriminate Trump for trying to overthrow democracy. And it makes you wonder, why was security rejected? Who rejected it? Why did they do that? Now look, of course, it's all stuff we've been reporting for a while now. You might remember, for example, when I did the very first documentary on this, The Real Story of January 6th, we interviewed Kash Patel, and we also showed that Trump had authorized the deployment of the National Guard. We were accused, I was accused of lying about that, but it's true. The truth is now coming out. Now, I've personally been heavily attacked for speaking out about what really took place on January 6th. I've had individuals tell me I should be thrown in prison merely for reporting on what took place. And again, mainly because I'm reporting what actually took place rather than what the corporate media are trying to convince you took place but did not. But guess what? The facts are coming out, and we've had it right from the very beginning. Everything we've been reporting has now been shown to be correct. Donald Trump authorized the deployment of the National Guard on January 6th. This was denied, rejected, of course, by key individuals on the Democrat side and others. And of course, what took place in the Capitol that day also was used by the Jan 6 committee, which at the same time was trying to cover up, delete, hide, and even threaten people in order to prevent key information from going public. That key information is now becoming more broadly known. Briefly again, if you haven't seen my documentaries, The Real Story of January 6th, we did a special feature on some of the unreleased footage, and we also now have The Real Story of January 6th Part 2 with my colleague Joe Hanneman. All of this, of course, has presented evidence which is only now coming out. Now look, at the same time as this is now being revealed and as the legal attacks on Trump are breaking in the seams, we also see that a very different system of justice has been used on the other side of the aisle. With Hunter Biden, for example, Republican lawmakers are now claiming that the Biden CIA may have been interfering with the investigations into Biden's son, Hunter. The National Post says Republican lawmakers on Capitol Hill say they've uncovered evidence that President Joe Biden's Central Intelligence Agency, the CIA, may have interfered with attempts by government investigators to speak with Patrick Kevin Morris, a crucial witness in Hunter Biden's tax case. Hunter previously admitted to receiving substantial loans from Morris, a Hollywood entertainment lawyer, to cover about $7 million in back taxes and legal fees. It notes that a whistleblower has provided evidence to lawmakers because, again, they're investigating Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, and they have, of course, an impeachment inquiry looking for evidence around these things that could lead to the impeachment of President Joe Biden. It notes that a whistleblower has provided evidence to lawmakers indicating the CIA summoned two of the lead government attorneys investigating Hunter Biden to Langley, Virginia, their headquarters, ahead of an interview with Morris. According to the individual who has spoken with the House Judiciary Committee, the CIA actively blocked officials from the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and the DOJ, Department of Justice, from interviewing several witnesses during the original Hunter Biden investigations. In other words, according to this individual, the CIA is interfering with an official government investigation, a legal one right now. Now, notes, quote, recently the committees received information from a whistleblower alleging that the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, intervened in the investigation of Hunter Biden to prevent the Internal Revenue Service, IRS, and the Department of Justice, DOJ investigators from interviewing a witness. That's a direct quote from Representative Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, which he wrote in a letter to the CIA Director, William Burns. And he added, quote, we therefore write to request relevant material from the CIA. In other words, the intelligence agencies seem to be covering for Biden in what is a legal investigation into his activities and the activities of his son. If it turns out that the CIA was involved in trying to hide evidence or prevent witnesses from coming forward, despite being, again, asked to appear by Congress, at the very least, this could represent acts of contempt of Congress, which, remember, Democrats have been throwing Trump team members into prison for. You know, Peter Navarro just went to prison for refusing to testify before the rigged J6 committee. And of course, we'll see if Republicans have the same gusto in going after individuals on the other side of the aisle when they're, of course, blocking Congress from doing its job. Again, obstructing Congress, which is a crime. Now, all of this is becoming more important as we head into the 2024 election season. And now you have even Obama, by the way, warning Biden that if Joe Biden doesn't change up his plans for a 2024 campaign, maybe the way he's doing things, like maybe not campaigning, well, guess what? Donald Trump may very well win the presidential election. I'll be talking more about this, though, only on Epoch TV, EpochTV.com. We'll also be going into how Biden is falling below the popularity red line for elections. All of this on EpochTV.com. So for those of you on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Rumble, this is your opening to come join us on Epoch TV for the rest of the episode and the Q&A. And just on the topic of CCP subversion with the elections, by the way, that's not the only part of the U.S. that's being subverted by China. Hollywood, as you may know, is also being heavily bought off and influenced by the Chinese Communist Party. And how it's happening, how they're doing this, is exposed in a new documentary from Epoch TV, which is called Hollywood Takeover. You can watch this on Epoch TV, link in the description below. Let me show you a quick trailer before we continue.
There's something magical about the movies that I just love.
Hollywood invented America to the world in the old days.
And as a medium, it's really powerful. But for some, that power isn't used for good.
Our way of life is being censored by the Chinese Communist Party.
They said, we get a lot of our money out of China. Is there any way you could make this movie a little bit more attractive to the Chinese?
Is it really just about money? Are there other parts at stake?
I had friends in Hollywood who said, this will kill your career. You won't get funding. They're afraid of even mentioning one line.
Chinese influence was playing into what we see in U.S. films.
China said, you can't have that in there. And Hollywood listened.
This is insane. This is a joke, right?
We raised our hand and we dove right into it. But over time, all of us have been punched in the nose.
The Chinese Communist Party followed no rules.
What's at stake? The soul of the nation is at stake.
We want indoctrination access to America. They could basically take over America without firing a shot because they control access to our minds.
And we all know that their goal is global domination.
People have been brainwashed without knowing it.